Now, Spirit certainly speaks to you in beautiful melodic ways, Rich, and we thank you for bringing that to us this morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We are still talking about karma and the fact that these lives, well, not this life, but the life of our soul is eternal, despite the limited capacity these physical bodies have. Lee and I were looking for something to do on a rainy evening one night last week and decided to go take in a show. We went to see Mamma Mia. If you want a fun, light, enjoyable break, go see it. And there's one scene in Mamma Mia where one of the characters immediately experiences the results of his less than stellar behavior. And in the movie, this feisty little old Greek granny is watching this unfold, and she looks at him and she says, "That's karma." And it's pronounced, "Ha!" Feels like that sometimes, doesn't it? When what we put out, what might be less than our most brilliant moments, comes back to us when we realize that what we put out is less than brilliant. Karma is very simply what we call in unity the law of cause and effect. It's a spiritual law. What we put out comes back to us. And it all operates on an energetic basis. It's about our energy, it's about our vibration. Everything, and this is a little scary, everything you think, say, and do goes out into the universe on an energetic level and comes back to you sooner or later with that same energy. In esoteric literature for thousands of years has made reference to the Akashic records. Anybody hear of those? A number of you. Or the Book of Life, as it's called. This is the energetic storehouse of all of the information of every individual that's ever lived. And it is the energetic imprint of every word, deed, thought, and feeling, and intent that has ever occurred at any time in history. Whew, it's a lot of data, but it's not a supercomputer. That's not needed. It's imprinted into the ethers by our thoughts, by our words, by our actions, by our feelings. Everything we put out there is there waiting to return to us in like kind. More than just a memory storehouse, the Akashic Records, or the Book of Life, is interactive. It has tremendous influence on our everyday lives, on our relationships, on our feelings, on our belief systems, and the potential realities we draw to us. I'm going to be real clear. When it comes to karma, we still have choice. Karma's not fate. Karma's not about predestination, but there are potential realities that can come back to us from what we've put out, whether it was yesterday or 3 lifetimes ago. How that plays out in our life here and now is based on our choices here and now. I've heard from a number of you with questions about finer points of karma, and I'm going to address a couple of those this morning. And I want to throw out the disclaimer again that I shared with you last week. I am sharing with you about karma and reincarnation as much as I know now from my spiritual evolution and my spiritual studies. I reserve the right to change my mind. And that's not just a feminine prerogative. As I grow spiritually, as I gain more insight, as I learn more, like Charles Fillmore, he reserved the right to change his mind, to refine his beliefs, his understandings, and what he taught. I don't have all the answers. Although I'll thank you not to tell my husband that. A question I got this week that I'm going to tackle with that disclaimer is from someone who said, I have extraordinary spiritual experiences frequently. Are they grace or are they karma? I have extraordinary spiritual experiences frequently. Are they grace? How many of you think they're grace? Show of hands. Are they karma? How many think they're karma? How many think they're both? Yes. And something more. Cumulative experience. See, our life experiences across eons of time, as well as karma, are cumulative. Nothing's ever lost. You ever wonder why some souls arrive in this world with extraordinary mathematical capability or incredible ability to write moving songs or spiritual experiences that some would deem fantastic? Folks who exhibit a specific passion and a strong drive, often emerging at a very young age, might well be exhibiting cumulative wisdom, knowledge, a passion that's come to them over probably numerous incarnations. We have here in this congregation a young man who just graduated from high school. At the tender age of 18, has already traveled the world in the name of environmental awareness and action. I strongly suspect his passion and purpose is from accumulated previous experience with environmental matters. So back to the question of extraordinary spiritual experiences. Yes, they are grace. Anyone who's ever had one has been touched by grace. Remember we talked about grace a few weeks ago. Grace is what comes back to us that far exceeds the good we ever put out. And grace is also the heavy energy that we put out that does not come back to us with the same weight as what we put out. In other words, grace rewards us more than we would expect and cuts us slack where we would not expect it. I do believe in that person's circumstance that karmic development has played a role. And yes, I also believe the accumulation of spiritual practices, both in this life and in previous lives, also plays a role in what that individual is experiencing. Grace, karma, and cumulative experience comes together, creating potentialities for us to choose to work with or not. Another interesting question was posed to me. Do you think people like Hitler or more current political figures choose to experience a life of lies, power, wealth, bigotry, and such as a growth process? Where does karma play for these people? That's a good question. As I considered it, as I pondered it and contemplated and asked for spiritual insight, it came to me that it's possible that their goal in this life was to learn to wield power, which isn't a bad thing. However, in their process of learning to handle power, they essentially wound up seduced by the dark side. And we all fall into that trap occasionally. Things like power, control, money, food, sex, adulation, all manner of sensory experience can detract us from developing spiritually. But here we are in this physical world with all of those temptations ever ready to pull us off course those individuals referenced in the question, the Hitlers and the Saddams, by their actions, I have to believe that they are incurring a very heavy karmic load. Why? Because their actions are putting out negative, heavy energy. And what we put out comes back to us. It's spiritual law. As we sow, so also we reap. What those individuals are doing is creating opportunities for many people to resolve karma. See, we can choose to respond to what they say and do as oppressive leaders with compassion and even peaceful resistance. We can reach out with love and care for those who have been oppressed. We can be a light in the darkness and, in so doing, resolve our own heavy karma. Think about 9/11, that horrific experience that wreaked destruction and terror on this country. Of the people that perpetuated it, there's no doubt in my mind we're incurring some very heavy karma. But look at how many people, hundreds and thousands, perhaps millions of people from around the country, from around the world, that reached out with love and compassion to help bring healing in the wake of destruction. Despite the heavy karma that perpetuated that action, a lot of lighter karma was generated as a result of it. The question about Hitler and other leaders took me to another place. Leadership. Leadership is a great responsibility, not only in this life, but in the big picture. A soldier who kills another in a military action, as I understand it, will have some karmic debt from that action. The commander of that soldier and other soldiers who direct that killing will have even more karmic debt. And the very top leadership, the upper echelons of the military and the politicians behind the military action will incur the heaviest karmic debt for the actions that they have instigated and directed. Something for us to be aware of anytime we step into a role of leadership. It's not just about us and what we're doing in our spiritual work, but how does what we're doing impact others around us, both now and in the big picture. Another question I got this week was about the karma of people who come into this world or in difficult situations, apparently through no cause of their own. Think about these recent border situations where children were removed from their parents. Would you tell those kids their experience of being separated from their parents was the result of their karmic death? Or a child, an infant, an innocent babe who comes into this world with a genetic challenge or an illness or disease, would you tell that child, oh, this is your karma? You deserve this? That is called metaphysical malpractice. Metaphysical malpractice is using what we understand as spiritual principle to make people wrong, to make them less than, to affix blame, or frame whatever they're dealing with as something deserving. It is not for us to judge. Frankly, how many of us have the ability to read the mind of the Creator and even make such discernments? You know, an egregious example of this is the caste system that's existed in India for thousands of years. A whole huge segment of society, due to their birth circumstances and the perception that their birth circumstances had to be inferior because of karmic debt, these people were horribly mistreated and labeled as untouchables. That is a classic example of metaphysical malpractice. How do we, as spiritual travelers, deal with a circumstance like that? We respond with love, with compassion. We reach out in whatever ways we're called to bring love and peace and comfort as we can offer, and we do it without judgment. If someone else is dealing with something karmically, that's their business. It's between them and their soul and Mother, Father, God as they understand. It's not our business. Our job as spiritual seekers is simply to know and live from spiritual truth. We talk about this in the fifth principle. Knowing spiritual truth isn't enough. We must live the truth that we know. It occurred to me, listening to some of you over the last few weeks and exploring how karma might be playing out in different ways, that we can get into this whole cycle of what I call karmic mind games. An awareness of karma can be useful to us. It can serve us on our spiritual path. However, when we get totally wrapped up in ferreting out the minutia of what may or may not be karma, we have become ensnared in the ego mind's need to know. And as we pander to ego and its mind games, we're distracted from doing our spiritual work. Our ego seeks to keep us in turmoil. And as it does so, it stops the flow of our spiritual life. As one of you so sagely observed last week on your way out the door, just be with the mystery. Just be with the mystery. We don't have all the answers. It's okay to consider them and kick around ideas, but don't let that become your focus. Remember, it's all about you and me learning and living from spiritual principles every day. Ultimately, it all circles back to higher consciousness, spiritual principles, and being, love, and expression. That's what facilitates a fulfilling life now and resolves karma. So how do we resolve karma? This is a quick recap. We've talked about it the last couple of weeks, but it bears repeating. If you want to resolve your karmic debt, meditate daily. That is key, that is crucial. As we meditate, we are told by the great teachers and sages of all time that any moment spent in the silence, just for a moment, what Deepak Chopra might call the gap, you know, that space where there is no thought, that's when karma is divinely healed. And we'll never get there if we don't meditate. And the other thing that happens in meditation is we get the divine guidance we need to live confidently from our spiritual principles and to reach out to others, which helps them on their journey, it helps us on our journey, and it helps us in the big picture in terms of our karmic journey. Manage your thoughts. Oh man, that's not easy, is it? Manage our thoughts. Our thoughts are things. We talk about that around here all the time. Our thoughts precede our attitudes and actions. And we talked last week about, as well as thought, intent. What is the purpose? What is the goal behind your thought and action? Our thoughts and actions are all recorded energetically in the universe. So every thought is important, and we are called to monitor them. Detach from the siren call of materiality and sensory experience. Don't give over to the dark side. Now, there's nothing wrong with materiality. We live in this world, we're physical beings. We have to have some understanding of how it works, and we obviously see how it affects us. But as one wise teacher said, be in the world, not of the world. Enjoy physicality, but don't let it distract you from the fact that you ultimately are a spiritual being having a human experience. Practice mindfulness. Charles Fillmore, Unity co-founder, says it's not what you've been, but what you are now that's the issue. So live in the now. Now is the only moment where we can make a choice. Right now is the only time that we can make a difference. Live on high moral ground. Accuse no one, even yourself. Live in ways that invite no complaint, and live true to yourself. A huge karma buster, forgive. And then forgive and forgive and forgive. Forgive others, forgive yourself. As we forgive, we are freed to be a full and wonderful higher spiritual expression, and we set others free from holding us back. Seek higher will, higher consciousness, and remember that grace is always in play. A generous gift to hurry along our karmic fulfillment and restoration to the perfection and the oneness that we were created. I got a wonderful gift this week. Sharon Freeman, Unity of the Valley's own poet laureate, penned a poem called Teacher, Teacher. You'll find it in this week's Buzz, and it's my honor to share it with you here today. Karma is the perfect teacher. Patience is her greatest virtue, teaching lessons over and over in her perfectly tailored classroom until we get them. The lessons we need to learn, the lessons of life. So join me once again as we know our affirmation for the day, because it all comes back to this. Together, grateful for the gift of life I develop spiritually as I faithfully practice spiritual principles. And so it is. Thank you.